Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I was thinking about something earlier. Have you ever felt this unsettling pull, this whisper that promises you you belong, right when everything around you feels like it's just falling apart?
Oh, absolutely. That yearning for meaning, especially when the world feels like totally meaningless, it's
Yeah.
so powerful.
It really is. And speaking of powerful, that brings us to today's deep dive, inspired by you, our listener, Oh Sinners, by Nicole Cuffy.
And for anyone who hasn't had the chance to check it out yet, it's a novel, a really fascinating one, actually.
Okay, so without any spoilers, the story basically follows this journalist, Faruq. He's dealing with grief and family stuff when he gets drawn into this mysterious community called the Nameless.
Led by this super enigmatic figure, Odo.
Right. And as Farouk gets deeper into this group, Cuffy weaves in excerpts from a documentary about Odo. But here's where it gets really interesting. There are also these historical and fictional threads about Nero and the Vietnam War, and somehow she connects it all.
It's so well done. I know for you, one of the things that really stood out was how she portrays Farouk's internal struggles. You really feel that vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's searching for answers, trying to make sense of this community, and you feel every bit of it.
And the way the novel kind of slowly reveals the beliefs and dynamics of the nameless, but never gives everything away. It's
Mhm.
so masterful. It just keeps you hooked.
It totally does. For me, it was the community itself. It's fascinating, their rituals, their devotion to Odo, and you just get this sense of something like simmering beneath the
Right.
surface.
And then those connections she makes, the nameless Nero, Vietnam, they seem so random at first, but then it all clicks. It's about those timeless human desires, those vulnerabilities playing out in these totally different contexts.
Exactly. And what's so cool is that Cuffy doesn't hit you over the head with it. It's not like, bam, here's the connection. She presents these echoes, a charismatic leader, disillusioned followers, the search for a different order, and you get to draw your own parallels.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
Yes.
About how certain human patterns just repeat themselves across time.
It does. Now, full disclosure, there are a few things that weren't my absolute favorite. I don't know about you, but the ambiguity, while interesting, left me with some
Oh, I
questions.
totally get that. Especially for someone who loves a clear resolution.
Yeah. And sometimes those shifts between Farouk's present, the documentary, and the historical stuff, while they paid off in the end, they could be a little jarring while I was reading.
It definitely requires you to stay engaged. You have to piece together the bigger picture Cuffy's creating.
For sure. But overall, Oh Sinners is a really powerful book, one that stays with you. I'd give it a solid 4 out of 5 stars.
I agree. Especially for you who's always looking for those stories that feel both timely and timeless.
Yeah,
This one definitely hits the mark.
it does. So let's get into it. How about we start with Farouk's first encounters with the Nameless? What are your initial impressions of this community? What jumps out at you?
Hmm. Well, right away, you get this sense of a carefully constructed world, you know, one that's totally separate from the everyday.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, the descriptions of their environment, the white houses, the empty square,
Yeah.
it creates this feeling of purity, but also isolation.
Right, right.
And then there's how they interact with Farouk. It's almost performative. That intense focus, the physical touch, it's designed to make him feel like he belongs immediately.
Like they're bypassing his critical thinking almost.
Exactly. It's like they're creating this instant intimacy, instant acceptance.
Which, for someone like Farouk, grieving, maybe feeling a bit lost, can be really seductive.
Absolutely.
And then there's Odo, this almost mythical figure. He's barely there physically, but his presence is huge.
I know. It makes you think about, where does his power come from?
Right.
It's not this obvious control or manipulation, at least not at first. It's more about this, carefully cultivated sense of community
Yeah.
and the promise of seeing the world differently.
They talk about shedding the distortion and grasping oneness, right?
Exactly. Being hipped, as they call it, that becomes the heart of their belief system.
Like Quiver, for example. She's adamant that she joined willingly, drawn by this sense of truth that she found in the Nameless.
Right, and Joaquin, the artist, he talks about how Odo helped him see beauty in a new way, to see past the ugliness of the world.
So for them, suffering and negativity are like illusions, distortions that Odo can help them overcome.
Which, when you think about it, taps into something so fundamental about being human.
How so?
Well, when you're hurting, the idea that your pain isn't real, that it's just a misperception, and that there's a path to something more beautiful, more unified, it can be incredibly powerful. It gives people hope.
It's like a sense of agency, even if that agency is ultimately directed towards the group and its leader.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's talk about those other narratives Cuffy weaves in, the ones that seem totally unrelated at first. Let's start with Nero. What connections did you find the most striking?
Well, those documentary excerpts about Odo, right? They feature Pastor Will Roy a lot. And he sees Odo and the Nameless as, like, this modern-day evil directly connected to Nero.
He even suggests Odo could be the Antichrist.
I know. But then you have Father Schuyler, who's more grounded in history.
Yeah.
He thinks the beast in Revelation was probably a metaphor for the Roman Emperor, Domitian.
So, two totally different interpretations of the same historical figure and his meaning. And I feel like Cuffy is using this to reflect the polarized reactions to Odo and the Nameless in the book itself.
Right, like it's this human tendency to interpret unfamiliar beliefs through what we already know, often with fear and judgment. And it's a pattern that keeps repeating throughout history.
It's like history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes,
Oh,
right?
exactly. And it raises this important question for us. How do we make sense of historical events and apply those lessons without resorting to, like, simplistic and potentially harmful comparisons?
For sure. Okay, and then there's the Vietnam War narrative. On the surface, it feels so different from everything else. What does that thread tell us about the bigger themes of the book?
Well, the Vietnam parts, focusing on Black American soldiers, they really immerse you in this world of trauma, disillusionment, and this desperate need for connection in the middle of chaos and violence.
That's heavy.
It is. You see these young men dealing with the horrors of war, the racism they face, the psychological toll it all takes, and, like, in the absence of any real support system, they create their own little communities.
It's a stark contrast to the seemingly peaceful world of the Nameless, but it shows how human connection can emerge even in the most brutal situations.
Right. And it emphasizes this universal need for belonging and shared understanding, no matter what the circumstances are. Those soldiers create their own kind of nameless community bound by their shared experiences and their need to survive.
So, taking a step back, would
Yeah.
you say that Cuffy is presenting these different narratives, the Nameless, Nero, Vietnam, as different expressions of this core human need for belief and belonging, whether it's spiritual, political, or just the need for human connection in the face of trauma?
I think that's a brilliant observation. The novel seems to be saying that this drive to find something bigger than ourselves, to connect with others who see the world the same way we do, it's a fundamental part of being human.
But it also shows the potential dangers, the risk of falling under the sway of a charismatic leader, losing your individuality within a group, and even conflict with those outside the group.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
And we see all of this through Faruq's journey, right? He starts as an outsider, observing, but then he gets pulled in, becomes more involved. What did you think of his character arc throughout the novel?
Well, his skepticism slowly starts to fade. It's replaced by curiosity and even, like, genuine moments of connection.
He's clearly attracted to the peace and belonging the Nameless offer, especially considering what he's going through.
Right. But his journalist instincts and that skepticism, they never fully disappear. It's this constant internal struggle that drives the whole story.
You see him trying so hard to be objective, but at the same time, he's experiencing the allure of this community firsthand. He questions their beliefs, but you also sense his own yearning for something more, a way to cope with his grief, a sense of purpose.
And the novel doesn't give you a neat and tidy answer about what happens to him or whether he finds what he's looking for. His experiences are complex, unsettling, and they force him to confront himself.
Yeah, those relationships with Kaya and Odo are full of ambiguity. You're left wondering, like, what's the real nature of those connections and how do they ultimately affect him?
Absolutely. It leaves a lot for the reader to ponder.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways from O Sinners that you think will resonate with you and hopefully with our listener who recommended it?
I think it really pushes us to think critically about belief and belonging, to move beyond those easy judgments about alternative communities and try to understand what drives people to seek them out. It also reminds us how important it is to think for ourselves, to maintain our individuality, even when we're part of a group that makes us feel safe and gives us purpose.
It makes you wonder why these groups are so appealing, especially for people who feel isolated, marginalized, or are going through tough times. The promise of acceptance and a clear worldview, it can be really hard to resist.
And what's really important is that the novel doesn't just demonize the nameless followers. It shows them as complex individuals with their own reasons, their own vulnerabilities, which is so crucial for understanding the bigger picture.
It's about recognizing their humanity, right?
Exactly.
So what's the one thought that sticks with you the most after exploring O Sinners?
It's that tension between our need for connection and belief and our need to think critically and make our own judgments. Like, how do we find that balance? How do we belong without losing ourselves?
That's a really powerful question. A lot to unpack there.
It is.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into O Sinners by Nicole Cuffy. It's been a really fascinating discussion.
I agree. A lot to think about.
Definitely. Now, before we go, if this conversation sparks something in you and you want to explore these themes further, please like and subscribe to our show. You can find a link to O Sinners on Amazon in the description.
We'd love to hear what you thought as well.
Absolutely. Share your favorite moment from our discussion or the part of the book that resonated with you the most in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.